I'm Josh McGarry, and I've been told that I can be hard to understand sometimes. But with some help from technology, maybe we can fix that. This is Frameworks.
You know, it feels like we're all just trying to find our place, right? Trying to build relationships that are actually solid and to just figure out who we are. But lately, it seems like the ground is always shifting underneath us. So, what if there was a blueprint for all of it? A kind of map for building a family, a life, with a real deep purpose? Well, in my research, I came across a theory that claims to be exactly that. It's called crib theory.
And it all really boils down to this question, doesn't it? In a world where everything can feel so temporary, where the rules seem to change every other day, what does it even mean to build a family that lasts? Not just survives, but actually has a purpose that goes beyond just getting by.
And this slide, this really gets to the heart of the whole thing. On one side, you have the way a lot of the world sees it. Family is basically a social contract. You know, a practical arrangement for mutual benefit. And if it stops being beneficial, well, the contract's over. But crib theory comes at it from a totally different angle. It argues that family is a permanent, God-given institution, something designed with an infinite purpose. It's not about circumstance, it's about design. So if you're going to build something for an infinite purpose, you can't really just wing it, can you? This theory claims you need a really detailed blueprint. And that's exactly what crib is supposed to be, a comprehensive structure for building something that doesn't just survive, but means something on a much, much bigger scale. Okay, so let's break down the name itself, crib. It's actually an acronym. It stands for the 4 communities that, according to this theory, all have to work together. That's covenantal, relational, infinite, and biological. Now, we're going to dig into what each of those means, but the core idea, the whole point, is to create this incredibly stable environment to ground a child's development. And the ultimate goal in this model is to connect that child directly to God, making the family the absolute foundation of their entire worldview. So if crib is the what, the blueprint, then the how is something called PFA. That stands for the proper flow of authority. You can think of this as the engine that makes the whole theory run. It's all about mapping out the ideal flow of authority in every single relationship, and it's all seen from the perspective of a child. And the number one most important rule is this. A healthy worldview has to start with God as the one and only point of origin. And here it is. This is that blueprint in action. This is the PFA diagram, so just take a look. You see God right at the very top. That's the point of origin we just talked about. From there, authority flows down, with the father positioned as the central crux, kind of the link between the spiritual and the family. And everyone else, the mother, the partner, friends, the church, they're all interconnected, creating this massive support system that flows right down to the child at the bottom. Every single line on here has a purpose. So let's put some titles to those roles you just saw on the map. At the very, very top, you have God as the ultimate point of origin. Then authority flows from there to the father, who's called the crux, the central hinge of the whole household. The mother is seen as the manager, supporting that structure and nurturing the spirit of the relationship. Then you have the partner, and this is key. It doesn't just mean a spouse. It means the broader community, like your church or close friends, who act as supporters. And at the end of that whole flow, that's the child, the next generation, who inherits this entire legacy. Now, if we kind of zoom out a bit from those specific roles, the theory says they all exist within these 4 distinct communities. This is the CRIB in crib theory. The infinite community is God. The covenantal is the church. Biological is your nuclear family. And relational is your close friends. The whole idea here is that a truly healthy family needs support from all 4 of these zones to actually work. It's a very different way of looking at it because it's not just about mom, dad, and the kids. Okay, so what happens if the blueprint gets ignored? What if that point of origin is in the wrong place? What happens when the flow gets all messed up? Well, the theory says this is a really common mistake, making the father the ultimate source. When that happens, you've basically bypassed God, and you're putting an impossible, crushing weight on one person. And that creates codependency because you're asking a human being to be the source of something they were only ever meant to be a representative of. Or let's look at another deviation. What if the church, that partner community, becomes the ultimate authority? From this theory's perspective, that's a problem too. It bypasses the core family unit God designed, and it can actually end up creating a distrust in the very system that was supposed to support you. And the last big deviation, making the child the center of the universe. The theory argues that when the child becomes the point of origin, the entire support structure just gets bypassed. It sets that child up to distrust care, because they're being put in a position of authority they were never, ever meant to handle. All right, so you see all these rules, this really specific, rigid structure, and you might be asking a pretty big question. How on earth is a system like this supposed to create personal security or a strong sense of self? It kind of seems like it would do the opposite, right? The research I looked at uses this really powerful metaphor for this. It calls the family a spiritual NICU, a neonatal intensive care unit, to grow people until they are ready to face the world. Now just think about that for a second. A NICU is a highly protective, super-structured environment, and it has one purpose: to build up strength so you can survive out in the world. That's the point of the rigid structure here. And what's so fascinating is how this path to building trust inside the crib model looks a whole lot like what you'd find in modern attachment theory. It argues that this structure builds trust in 3 stages. First, you have trust of care, just knowing your needs will be met consistently. That then leads to trust of control, where you learn to trust that the limits your caregiver sets are safe and for your own good. And finally, all of that builds trust of self, where you internalize those boundaries and learn how to make good decisions for yourself. So you see, the structure isn't about control for control's sake. It's the very thing that's supposed to build a secure, independent identity. So what's the big payoff for following this PFA model? What's the point of all of it? Well, according to the theory, it's designed to have a direct impact on the 3 biggest questions we all struggle with: your identity, who you are; your security, how safe you feel in the world; and your purpose, why you are even here. In a world that often leaves those questions just hanging in the air, crib theory offers itself as a definitive roadmap to the answers. So I'll just leave you with this final, challenging question that my research poses. It's one that kind of forces you to decide what you think family is really all about. Are you brave enough to want your family to mean something on an infinite level? It's a call to action, really, a challenge to decide if family is just a temporary deal or if it's supposed to be part of a much bigger, much more permanent story.